This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
The fall of Robert Lipscomb, questions about the Urban Child Institute, and more tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by Toby Sells from the Memphis Flyer. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And Bill Dries, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. And we're doing a roundtable this week talking about some of the biggest stories of the week. And Bill, the story about Robert Lipscomb, I guess it came out last Saturday night,
right,
that I got a news alert from you and other people, other outlets. And it was just really kind of breathtaking because of the power and the scope and the range of authority and impact that Robert Lipscomb has had on this city, for good and bad. I'm not even judging that part. And then the allegations were so dramatic. But tell us, for those who somehow haven't heard, what's going on.
Well, these are formal allegations of sexual abuse of minors by Robert Lipscomb, who is the city's director of housing, was the city's director of housing and community development until this surfaced last Sunday. He was also the director of the Memphis Housing Authority, been in those positions through 2 mayoral administrations, controlled to a great degree, actually an unprecedented degree for a city division director, hundreds of millions of dollars of federal funding that came into the city that has changed public housing as we know it, also led the 10-year effort to redevelop the pyramid. Very serious, completely unexpected allegations that really very few people could have foreseen. However, the man who came forward and called City Hall cold to kick all of this off had actually complained to Memphis police 5 years earlier in 2010 about the same thing on the part of Lipscomb.
Yeah, and I read that he maybe had approached Myron Lowry, city councilman. I think I read that this morning, and that Myron Lowry is saying, well, you know, he approached me at a gas station. I said you should call the police about that. So there's some vagaries about he came forward, but he didn't necessarily leave his name. I mean, a lot to be determined in terms of what all of that. And we should say again and again, these are allegations, they're not proven. But I mean, Toby, you've covered City Hall, you've covered business in Memphis for a long time. It's just amazing. I mean, because Robert Lipscomb, even if people don't know him, he's an unelected official. He's a power broker behind the scenes.
Right.
Bill talked about it. It's remarkable the impact the guy has had on the city.
If you wanted to do anything big in the city of Memphis, you go to Robert Lipscomb's office for a visit. Right. That was his impact here. As Bill said, directed hundreds of millions of dollars, got the Bass Pro deal done, which was more than a $100 million deal for the city. And extremely powerful, yeah, and behind the scenes, but huge, and his impact, the loss of is going to be felt for a long time. And
there are, is it 10 big public housing projects that were in Memphis? 9 of them have been transformed. I got that number right.
That's right.
And the one that's pending, which is South City, it's kind of the Vance Avenue. What would that be? East of the South Main District, which is we're on the short list of choice neighborhoods. Do we know? I mean, do you want to take this? I mean, is there any? What's the impact on some of the projects, particularly that, which is a really big one? Could it be impacted by these allegations?
As far as I know, the city's application to the federal government for the funds has already been executed. We're waiting to hear word back.
Right.
That project, of course, would transform Foot Homes into these other mixed-use or mixed-income properties like the others. So I don't think his absence is going to impact that a whole lot. Maybe Bill, you can correct me there, but
there's an audit. I mean, I guess that's where and I may be talking about 2 things at once. But there's going to be an audit of everything because there were payments. That I think is clear at this point. There were payments from Robert Lipscomb to someone he was blackmailed to keep him quiet. We don't know, but I think for that reason alone, the city has said we're going to audit everything he was involved with.
And there's also a routine aspect to that. Any time a division director with control over this much money leaves office for whatever the reason is, there's going to be an audit of it. And the feds are probably going to have some questions because of the allegations that some payoffs were made. They're going to want some assurances that either that didn't happen, or that if it did happen, that these were not federal funds that they sent to the city.
Right. And one of the other ones that you may have touched on, Toby, the fairgrounds. I mean, Robert has been deeply involved in that pre-recession. Everything sort of went in hibernation through the recession.
Right.
Do any sense of what happens with the fairgrounds? And
I think now everybody is on taking a pause. I've heard from members of the Coliseum Coalition, and they said we're taking a wait-and-see approach. We don't know yet what's going to happen, and this was even after Lipscomb had kind of backed off the aggressive plan to go for the youth sports complex idea, taking a bit of a breather. And now I think that's probably on the shelf. The whole idea is on the shelf for a minute.
they've named interim people.
Yes. Mara Black Sullivan, who is the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for the city, is the new director of the Memphis Housing Authority. And she will take a leave from the Deputy CAO's position.
But she's been very involved in planning and these sorts of projects, right? Am I right about that?
Yes, she has a lot of experience with planning, both with the Shelby County school system and in other roles as well.
And then the other job that he had, because this was always, we'll get into this in a second, Robert Lipscomb carried 2 titles, 2 jobs, and 2 salaries. The other will be taken over on the interim basis by...
Right. The Housing and Community Development position is being taken by one of his deputy directors.
Right, Debbie Singleton.
Yes.
Debbie Singleton. And that was always a criticism from some people that Robert Lipscomb was paid with the 2 salaries, $250,000 a year, a lot of money for a public figure, and he carried 2 job titles, and the secrecy. I mean, thoughts on that now? And we should say one of the jobs he's going to continue to be paid. He's on unpaid. He's on paid leave.
Suspension from the MHA.
But the MHA Chairman Ian Randolph yesterday said that they're conducting their own internal look at Lipscomb. They're going to come back in another meeting on the 16th to determine disciplinary action against Lipscomb. But you're absolutely right as far as the money, and I think and the secrecy surrounding his office. I think now that the light is going to shine into both of those jobs, and I don't think that we've heard the last of these stories.
Yeah.
There have always been questions about whether one person should have this much control. And the argument on the other side has been that because one person has had this control, these things have gotten done in some cases on an expedited basis. In others, it's taken a long time, as in 10 years with the pyramid.
Right. I mean, because there are people who we've had him on the show, Ken Reardon, probably most who have organized against some of these transformations of public housing projects. But what Memphis has done with its public housing is not unprecedented, but it's pretty remarkable. The people I've talked to, and we've talked about on the show over the years, people just haven't transformed public housing the way that Robert did, and he did it with a hammer. He did it with he just forced these things to happen.
Yeah.
And you look at the Bass Pro pyramid deal. I mean, how many adaptive reuses of major civic arenas have there been in the country?
That are not churches.
That are not churches.
That's right.
I mean, it's pretty, again, I mean, so back to this thing of did all that power and that kind of secrecy and the ability to work as an unelected official is sort of affected. But I think, I can't imagine that this isn't the end of it. There's not going to be a new person comes in with the same sort of authority and freedom to get things done.
Yeah,
right?
Lipscomb did the job for 20 plus years. He'd been there a long, long time. Made inroads on both jobs and did things effectively his own way. But he got things done, and yet again, as a reporter, it was pretty tough to kind of chisel in and see what was going on inside those 2 jobs.
Right.
So,
yeah, and I didn't mean to imply that Maura or Debbie won't be effective. I just think the way in which he operated is probably not going to be that kind of secrecy and so on is not going to be repeated. Sure. That doesn't mean they can't be very effective.
And when Wharton took office in late 2009, there was a debate within the administration about does this arrangement with Robert Lipscomb continue?
Right.
And ultimately, the administration decided that it would because of what he had been able to accomplish.
Again, I want to say, as I keep saying, that these are allegations at this point. There's a lot that's unknown. Because they're allegations, we're not going to focus on all of them because it's just there's just so much muddiness. But we will talk about the politics and the implication of this. It's an election season bill. Robert Lipscomb is a controversial figure anyway for the reasons we've talked about. What are the political implications? Because I've heard people on both ends of the spectrum. This is a terrible thing for Wharton. to have happen right now to, actually this is kind of a good thing because people didn't like Lipscomb. Again, in kind of cold political terms, what's your take?
In cold political terms, I think the scandal is still moving. So it's really hard to tell. I don't think there's any doubt that Mayor Wharton takes a hit in what was already a tight re-election battle
Takes a hit
for him.
because maybe these allegations weren't acted on fast enough, or what would the hit be? Just the tarnish?
I think the hit is what happened after the initial aftermath. The report that the first accuser of Robert Lipscomb had gone to the police 5 years earlier, and there are a lot of questions about the city's response. The police tried to find him. That much is clear from the email memos, but they couldn't. This young man was homeless at the time, but when he called City Hall in late August, just about a week ago, he got all the way to the mayor. Right. And the mayor, after talking with him, then sent the police director, the city's police director, right, and several investigators to the Seattle area to talk with him in person.
I mean, that was one of the things that struck me, Toby. I mean, that you and I haven't talked about this, but sometimes people criticize Wharton for being too slow-moving. He wants everyone to get along. He wants to do a committee. I mean, that's one of the criticism Wharton's getting. This is more Wharton as lawyer. I mean, he acted incredibly quickly, it seems, at as far as what we know at this point.
Sure. And that phone call, like Bill said, went straight to the top somehow. You know, it got buried back in 2010 somehow back then, and this time got straight to the mayor's office. And I think his lawyer instincts did kick in and knew that he needed to act decisively and act quickly and really cover himself, and got it taken care of very quickly. Had a phone call a week later. Like you said, Tony and some Director Armstrong and some investigators were on their way to Seattle. Came back Sunday. You know, the news release went out from the mayor's office late, like 11 o'clock Sunday night. By Monday, he had resigned. It was really quickly
decisive,
moving.
And a lot of things, again, cold political terms, things that people criticize Wharton for not being, really did take place here. And I should say too that Jack Salmon's the chief administrative officer for the city. I think what they've said is that the call that came in 2010 from this person, he didn't leave his name, he didn't leave a number. It actually sounds kind of callous, but Jack Simmons has said there isn't a white pages where you can look up somebody's phone number who's homeless. There is not a white pages for homeless people, to paraphrase it. And so they're a little on the defensive, I think, which gets to your point. But so far, you know, they just say they couldn't find a way to track him down.
Well, and I think the response in the first 3 days of this have been very interesting as well. Ricky Wilkins, who is the attorney for Robert Lipscomb, has been very critical of the leaks of information about this investigation in those first 3 days. But I think that the people around the mayor felt like something had to be said, and we had to have some details released of this because they've looked at what's happened with the Darius Stewart police shooting, where we haven't had any details, and it's been over a month since that happened. I think in this case, there were people within the administration who said, we've got to get some information out there on this.
You want to wrap up this election thing here, but any other thoughts from your seat? I know you don't cover the elections directly, but just, I mean, you've been in City Hall politics covering all this stuff. I mean, is it the impact for Strickland, for Collins, for Mike Williams, for the other candidates, kind of top candidates?
I think it's going to be a tricky one for them to either put away or to you know, kind of make any kind of political cash on, because I mean it is such a sticky thing, and the scandal is still moving. People don't know how to respond to it just yet, so we'll see how it's going to affect October.
Right, and I should say, we wrap this up, that we are having a live debate forum with those candidates I just mentioned: Wharton, Mike Williams, Jim Strickland, Harold Collins, on September 17th. I think the last debate before early voting begins, but more on that as time goes by. Let's segue out of elections to a story you did. It's the cover story from the Memphis Flyer on the Urban Child Institute, and raising some questions about the organization. Tell us what the story is, and tell us what some of those questions and concerns are.
The story focused on, of course, the Urban Child Institute, and for years and years, people in the nonprofit world, critics have said that they sit on this huge investment fund, which as of last year was around $148 million. And they could spend that money to actually help children in the community. Instead, they sit on it, they watch it grow, and they spend very little of it on things directly in the community. And all of this while they pay their CEO, Gene Cashman, what some considered to be an exorbitant amount of money. It was about $633,000 in 2013. And critics say that's way too much. National and local comparisons kind of bear that out.
On the salary thing,
right.
The Memphis Magazine, John Branston, your colleague over on the magazine side, had, from Assisi, from Plow, from Hyde Foundation, Poplar, some of the big ones
right.
with comparable endowments. The salaries tended to be in the $300,000, $250 to $325 range. So this Urban Child Institute salary is certainly double that.
Certainly.
But part of it is, there's the salary, but no one's saying there's any malfeasance going on. We should definitely clarify that, because we've just come off a thing of allegations and so on. But the giving, the percentage of how much money goes out the door.
Right.
So Urban Child, for people who aren't familiar with it, they probably read about it. We rely on their very informative stuff on early brain development. We've had people, doctors and scientists from the Urban Child Institute on the show. We had them on the show, Bill, when we were doing shows on the pre-K vote. And, it was kind of a compelling to have this doctor who knew, the politicians sit here, as they often do on our show, and debate whether we can fund it, and debate whether it's effective. And then we had the scientist who could say, oh, no, it's effective. And we can point to all the research. And so I don't think anyone doubts that the research they do and that they put out there is tremendously valuable and makes this case for early intervention and what it takes. Again, I'm stepping on you, but the point is, the criticism from some quarters is that, okay, you've teed up what the problem is. You're sitting on $150 million, and you're only giving out these days, in the last years, maybe $2 million
exactly.
a year. Is that
That's right. And the organizations that they give the money to, they're big supporters of UT Health Science Center for some of their research, University of Memphis for some of their research, and they also look at early child development. But they also give to folks like Victorian Village and the New Memphis Institute. And Gene Cashman, the CEO, told me that investments there help get their message out, to people at large. But critics say, you've done this study for many, many years. You come out with that data book every year, and we're spinning our wheels on this research. We know it's a problem. You've defined the problem. Let's use your money that you have to go after these problems.
Right, and let me go through from Memphis Magazine, some of the big foundations giving out I can't quite see it here, but in recent years, so Assisi gave out $10 million, the Hyde Foundation gave out 10, and then another $8 million. The Plow Foundation, $12 million in grants. Poplar Foundation, $12 million. Pyramid Peak, $30 million. Urban Child Institute, as I said before, $2 million. And all of them have so the percentage, again, giving to what the assets are, giving to what the corpus is where people, Andy Cates is quoted in your story, and I should disclose Andy is a friend of mine, but the Cates family, his brother Staley, who runs which of the foundations?
Poplar Foundation.
Poplar Foundation. And tremendous philanthropist, whatever, Andy went on the record. A lot of people didn't want to go on the record, right? It's because it's a touchy subject.
Right, absolutely. I will say, Urban Child, Gene Cashman told me, and of course, and I saw the tax documents, they are set up differently than a lot of these foundations out there. They don't have a percentage that they have to give away. The federally mandated, I think it's 5% that some folks like Assisi and Plow, they have to give the money out. And Gene Cashman told me, we don't have to. There's not a percentage for us. We can do what we want with our money.
And again, which gets back to no one here, no one's here saying there's any kind of malfeasance, there's anything, the board votes on the compensation, the board sets the investments. It's all managed, legally and so on. But again, the questions from the philanthropic community who would like to see more, and I don't want to pick on Andy, but Andy was the one who went on the record, and I've had people come to me afterward, off the record, and say, yeah, it's a problem. And people in the philanthropic community and say, we'd like them to be given money out, and they're not.
And we also are in an era where more and more people are questioning results. As opposed to what's in the annual report.
That's right.
Beyond the figures, there's a thing of so many of the problems that these groups work with are deeply entrenched problems that are actually a part of the city's history, if not a part of the city's culture. So we're beginning to see a lot of pushback from we know there's a problem. We know it's, you know, you can give me the exact numbers, but we're aware it is. The issue is, what are we doing about it? And is what we're doing effective?
Well, and you also, I mean, you see that in the schools, and, you know, there's the debate about too much testing in the schools and all that, but at the same time, it is interesting to watch the outcomes of iZone schools, because we have those people on, and the ASD schools and the charter schools, and there's this kind of real focus in a lot of the groups I just mentioned are very heavily involved in the charter schools and, you know, funding that and wanting to see outcome-based, you know, results, as you're saying. But again, I want to, you know, reiterate, no one's talking about malfeasance because we're talking about allegations, we're talking about other things, and I don't want to get that muddied up. It is just an interesting debate and interesting question that you all were able to raise, and again, combined with the stuff that's in the Memphis magazine, I encourage people to read it and agree or disagree. Right. You know, I think that was good. Let's move to Shelby County Schools. Bill has filed a lawsuit. I just mentioned the schools. This was being explored by the board, pushed by certain board members, Chris Caldwell, I think most notably, Dorsey Hobson, the former general counsel for Shelby County Schools, now superintendent, was a little wary, but they're going ahead with a lawsuit against the state. What is that lawsuit about?
The lawsuit is about a statewide issue, and that is state funding for what is called the Basic Education Program, or the BEP for short, because in government you have to have a lot of letters that stand for things, otherwise it's not government. But
Bill's not cynical. You're never cynical. Don't be cynical. Don't be cynical.
The BEP is basically the formula that determines how the state distributes its funding to this school, local school system, this one and this one over here, regardless of whether they're rural, urban, actually makes distinctions for that. So the state has not been fully funding the formula ever. And there's been a lot of talk about the state should be forced to at least increase the funding. So Shelby County Schools has filed a lawsuit in Chancery Court in Davidson County, but they have not joined the other lawsuits filed by a group of school systems in the eastern part of the state.
Chattanooga,
and the school systems in the surrounding county there. They have instead filed their own lawsuit, and that was because they feel like the issues that are going to be explored in that lawsuit with Shelby County Schools and its share of state funding are unique to our situation here.
And the way that Shelby County Schools calculates, it's $100 million in additional funding from the state. And which is huge. So we're not talking about a small amount of money. I mean, the other thing, I don't get this, and I don't know if you can answer it, and I was talking to somebody else about it. The state acknowledges that they're not fully funding it. Does the law say that they are required to fully fund it, or does the law say, well, that'd be nice if you'd fully fund it?
Well, that's what the lawsuit is going to be about, because the school system quotes a passage from the Tennessee Constitution that it says does require the state to fully fund under this formula or whatever formula is in place. And it's a critical issue because state funding, including federal funding that is passed through to local school systems by the state, is the bulk, the largest single amount of funding that local school systems across the state get. So it's a crucial amount of money. But the lawsuit is going to be about what that part of the state constitution means. The state, I would predict, is going to argue that that phrasing in the state constitution is very general and very vague.
Yeah. And I don't know your thoughts on this. I'm not sure how much you're tracking this stuff, but I mean, we've had Chris Barbick from the ASD on. And he's he was kind of funny about it. He goes, well, yeah, I think that'd be good for us, but he works for the state, and it wouldn't just, I think, if they ruled in favor of Chattanooga or in favor of Memphis, I think it would impact all the states. So it'd be hundreds of millions of dollars that in additional money, state, federal money that would go to the schools. Haslam has said, look, we'd love to fund BEP fully. We just don't have the money. Critics have said, well, you don't have the money. If you lose this lawsuit, you'll find the money. I mean, somehow, there is the money out there. I mean, not to be flippant about taxes, but you can tax or you can stop spending money on something else.
Well, and I think at the root of this lawsuit is the legislature and its willingness to increase the funding to the BEP, even if the governor were to propose that.
Now, Bill, you know that everyone who comes on this show says they want to fund schools more. Everyone says that.
Everyone is for
They
education.
all say that,
Sure.
Toby, right? Don't they always say that?
How can
Every
you be against
politician
that?
running, everyone's in favor of funding more for schools,
Sure.
but
Everyone's
again,
for education and everyone's against crime. But when you start talking about the dollar amount and
Right.
what the dollars are going to go for, then you have a debate.
yeah. Let us segue into, joking a little bit here, but segue into a serious thing going on in the Germantown schools. A CFO there was fired by Jason Manuel, by the superintendent, or was fired by the school system, is accusing the superintendent, Jason Manuel, of fudging some numbers. I mean, you want to take this?
Yeah, these are
allegations.
these were the critical discussions that the Germantown School Board and its superintendent had going into the start of the suburban school districts, and it was specifically about shared services, the cafeteria and other back office functions of all of the school systems that they decided to do on a common basis to pool their resources and pursue it that way. Well, the Germantown School Board had a pretty good debate about whether they should do that or whether they should not. And the CFO for the Germantown school system is alleging that some numbers were fudged to make it look like the school system should go ahead and do the shared services, which some of the board members did not want to do initially. I was there for some of the discussions, not all of the discussions, and what I remember is that Jason Manuel told his school board that basically this is an all or nothing agreement.
Right.
You can't pick shared services, one or two of them,
Right.
but then not go for the others with the other school districts.
Wait, there's more to this. Jane Roberts from the Commercial Appeal, I've got her story here, did a great job with it. People should look at that. Thank you, Bill, for the summary. Thanks for being here. Toby, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for joining us. Join us again next week.